Welcome to Live with Living Cities, the podcast where we explore how to build a just and equitable society by dismantling systemic barriers to financial equity. I'm your host, Justin Charles. On today's episode, we're honored to bring you an inspiring fireside chat between Living Cities President and CEO, Joe Scantlebury, and the Mayor of St. Paul, Minnesota, Melvin Carter. Their conversation highlights St. Paul's leadership in advancing financial empowerment and localizing community wealth building through shared ownership and solidarity economy strategies. St. Paul is one of the cities in our Closing the Gaps network cohort, supported by Wells Fargo and City Foundation. Alongside Austin, Albuquerque, Memphis, Minneapolis, and Rochester, the CTG cohort focuses on expanding wealth-building opportunities through business and home ownership. And now, as these efforts move into the evaluation phase, stories of impact from cities like St. Paul are key to inspiring replication across the broader network. Now, before we dive into the conversation, here's a powerful perspective from Joe on why Living Cities is committed to supporting local leaders.
Local leaders in local communities carry a tremendous amount of weight and get very little glory. They have to solve problems in real time. They have to work with fixed budgets. They have to work with constituents who are their neighbors, who they run into in the grocery store. They have to figure out how to have strong debates, have disagreements, and still come together in communities. And when you have leaders like the Mayor of St. Paul and others, there are leaders across this country who take that responsibility seriously. We want to support those leaders. We want to get them the knowledge capital they need in order to share what's possible in their cities and not waste time. We want to make sure that they have the social capital. They're connected to the people who could actually inform a decision that they need to make, the technical assistance they may need in order to solve a problem. And we are humble and agnostic about this. This is not about Living Cities' brand. This is about how can we be a reliable, trusted partner to those leaders. And fundamentally, if it's about investment capital, how do we help them make the case for the things that can grow from proper investment? There is no economic return without investment. We know that. So the investment of both knowledge capital, social capital, and financial capital, these are the things that we hope we can bring to mayors, and we hope we can bring to city leaders, both elected, appointed, and civic leaders who are every day working on these issues.
Now, the discussion you're about to hear was recorded during the City of St. Paul's Office of Financial Empowerment's one-day conference, hosted with support from Living Cities, Nexus Community Partners, and Project Equity. The event informs and engages city staff and policymakers on embedding shared ownership strategies into local governance, empowering worker-owned cooperatives and community-owned entities while expanding the ecosystem for equity-driven economic transformation. Now, let's join Joe and Mayor Carter as they dive into these transformative ideas.
Mayor Carter, I am really curious. Here's a city, here's the initiatives that are happening here around collaboration, inclusion, shared ownership. How's this happening here? From your perspective, what makes this fertile ground for this kind of work?
You know, I appreciate the question. I think all ground is fertile ground for this kind of work. You started off talking about stuff and our obsession with like stuff at the expense of people. Mm-hmm. And, you know, people in this room know the name Rondo, right? I'm from a neighborhood called Rondo.
Yes. And
I tell folks all the time, I don't know what city you from, but you have the Rondo neighborhood. It just has a different name.
Correct.
But Rondo is the once thriving, vibrant, historic African-American community here in St. Paul that was uprooted to build the freeway. And all that means is that somebody in all of our seats, somebody at the city, somebody at the federal government, somebody at a nonprofit organization, somebody at a foundation, all looked at a strip of 700 people's homes, 700 families' homes, and said, hey, we could have a strip of concrete there. Said, you know what progress would be? Is if these homeowners and these business owners and these real estate owners, all of these children here, if we bulldozed all these families' homes and put a slab of concrete down, that would be progress.
Right.
And so it's not just to me that our addiction to stuff has slowed our progress to helping people. It's that our addiction to stuff has literally buried people. To the extent that the reason I decided I wanted to run for city council in the first place 15 years ago was because we were building light rail on University Avenue. And look at the history if you weren't there. Like, we had this fight about these 3 missing stations that should have been on the line, right? People would always say, look, our studies show that people are going to be willing to walk a half a mile to a quarter of a mile to get to one of the stations. And I always asked, and nobody ever answered, are these August miles? That makes a difference. Are these January miles? Like, what are we talking about? Because the math is different. You got to, your calculator. You look at the whole stretch of that line, and the station spacing was all half mile to a quarter mile apart. You get to the boundaries of the area I used to represent, literally the boundaries of the area I used to represent in the city council, and the boundaries skip to a mile. And then to help fund the thing, we said, well, we got to, reduce the bus service here. So the neighborhood that I grew up in, the intersection closest to that, where the train is that I grew up on, by the Met Council's own numbers, would have had less access to transit service as a result of this $1 billion transit investment that we were putting in. Right. Less net access between not having a train stop there and having the bus come less. But all of the cost of construction, all of the business interruption, all of the inconvenience, all of it. And so this fixation, I'm stuck on this fixation with stuff that you were talking about. Keep going. Because it's super, super real, and it continues to act today. So when I ran for mayor the first time, we spent 2 years just in living rooms and coffee shops, just asking people, tell me about, what are you thinking? What's your vision? What are you feeling? And I think the 2 biggest themes that we heard, the 2 biggest things that I heard is, one, I heard people all over the city say, we have more to offer. We're not being asked to, we're being asked sometimes what we think, but we're not being asked to help or to pitch in and put our hands on something.
I just heard that. Go ahead.
Okay, good, good. And the second piece was, we're used to cities sort of investing to create the general dynamics in which success is theoretically possible for people who understand the navigation map, right? But we're not really used to cities helping people. And that's a different thing. Right? If you just need help feeding your family, you go to the county. Right? If you need help with homework, you go to the school board, right? We're used to if you need help with rezoning a parcel of land so that you can do development, that's when you go to the city, right? Right. But we didn't really have a body of work just saying we're gonna help people. And so those are the 2 things that and they end up working together, because we always talk about, and it's good to be in this space. So Project Equity. Equity is a word we use a lot. In my bio, it says that I'm some champion for equity or something like that. And the first thing we have to understand is what the word equity means. And it's astounding. We were talking about this yesterday at City House. Only when we start that conversation about black and brown people. Right. I went to business school. The only time equity doesn't mean money is when we're talking about brown and black people. Fight me. I'll give you the microphone. When we're talking about brown and black people, we're talking about how we feel when we do it, right? That's right. You know what I'm saying? That's right. That's the only time, equity literally means shared economics. That's correct. But when we started connecting it with racial justice and racial fairness, and I recognize what you said really early on, we are always bringing race implicit solutions to solve race explicit problems.
Even when we don't talk about it.
Always. Mm-hmm. You know what? These kids in this, we notice that black and brown kids are less likely this and more likely this, and so we're going to target this resource to low-income kids. Wait, that's not what you said. We know that black and brown women are more likely to experience X, Y, and Z in childbirth, so we're going to target this solution to these zip codes. That's not what you said. That's the answer is in the question. That's not even what you said. And so when we launched the St. Paul Promise neighborhood, when I was on the city council, there were people that sounds like you're just talking about focusing on black children. And I would say, listen, I want to focus on the data. And let me tell you, when the data says that we can move our focus away from young black boys, from black and brown young girls. When the data says we can move our focus somewhere else, I'll make the motion.
Right.
So all I have to say is I think what ends up happening is a lot of stuff we do, people look at me and go, oh, that's so brave. And that's a crazy thing to hear sometimes.
Oh, it's better than, you're so articulate.
That is.
Inside, but obvious joke.
His wife is my big sister, right? And community big sister. I just texted her. I texted her a picture of you doing my intro, and I said, he talk good. And I'll show you. She responded, he's so articulate. Yes, he is. Yes, he is. So you're right on time with that. Here's the answer. I've become convinced that every decision in the history of humankind has been made to benefit who? The decision maker. And every decision that will be made is like, I try to be as altruistic as possible, but I rarely make decisions that I think are just going to like screw me over. Right? And so at some level, if we want City Hall, if we want the resources, the policies, the decisions we make in City Hall to benefit a wider set of people, the only real option, like on a sustainable systemic level, is to build a wider set of decision makers. Right. If we want our policies to benefit young people, the young people have to be at the table. If we want our policies to benefit communities of color have to be at the seniors, whoever it is. If they're not at the table, I promise you cannot build a system. You cannot build inclusive. You cannot get inclusive outcomes with exclusive systems. And so what ends up happening is we get a chance to sort of detach St. Paul from the traditional risk calculus that says doing something like taking $1 million in American Rescue Plan funding and using it to purchase and eliminate $100 million in medical debt that our residents owe. Inside City Hall, that feels risky, right? Like politically risky or like a lightning rod or something, right? Everywhere else, it feels like a great investment. It feels like the absolute best. Like I tell people all the time, like if this is a family, right? If I was going to say, we're going to take the Scantlebury family and get them all together, and we're going to take $100 million that the Scantlebury family owes in debt.
Not me.
And if we can come up with $1 million, we'll make the Scantlebury family $100 million better off. I guarantee. Our first question is this real? Right. Our second question is this legal? And I just want to know, like, like that doesn't necessarily end the conversation, but I just want to be clear. You know what I'm saying? And the third question is, how can we do everything we can possibly do to make that happen?
That's right.
And so this is where, our mantra is like, what would happen if we look at a city and just say, this city is built not on a love of the stuff, but on a pure love of the people, and driven by this sense that like the unsheltered neighbors that we have, the children in every school, in every neighborhood, the families that we talk about in campaign speeches all the time, like pretend we love them the same way we love the people we kiss every morning when we walk out the door. Amen. What would we do?
So let me just say, first of all, I love that opening.
That was long.
It was long, but not a pin. You could hear a pin drop. They may have heard all this before in many different ways, but it's always good to hear it again. So philanthropy, love of humanity, that's what you just described. Yeah. How has philanthropy been helpful? And how has it been less than helpful? And present company accepted, Mark.
I'll tell you, McKnight has been just fantastic every step along the way. And they really have. They've been a great partner. I'll go the opposite direction.
And Tanya's a mad truth teller. So
here's the thing. We wouldn't be able to be where we are without philanthropy, right? Mm-hmm. The truth is, we have when people look, it's like, oh, yeah, you're on $1 billion budget every year. It's like, yeah, but all of that money is like bought and sold before we ever see it, right? And there's so little that we have that we can be flexible and like innovative and entrepreneurial with and like come up with like a new idea to do something, and people always look, oh, you're wasting money on this or you're doing. And the truth is, most of the things that like people tweet, you shouldn't have spent money is it's a grant money from somewhere, right? That's because we just don't have the ability a lot of times, right? And so one of the things that we've been really proud of is our ability to use, we call cities a laboratory of democracy. You ever heard that before? The problem is we are a laboratory without an R&D budget. Right?
That's right. That's right.
And
most cities have no flexibility
none.
to try anything.
That's exactly right. Because we're always like behind the 8 ball, and inflation always kicks our butt. Like every year, this year the number was $19.4 million. Right? From this year to next year, I could increase our city's budget by $19.4 million. That'd be a double-digit property tax increase just to pay for all the same stuff we paid for last year, right? Now without anything new. So not even just this year's budget being tight, we're always like trying to figure out what we're gonna, which arms we're gonna cut off for next year's budget. Right. And so we have no R&D budget. I'll say this. I think philanthropy has come a long way, like in the time that I've been working in this space. I remember when we were starting the Promised Neighborhood, and everybody was, the buzzword was always, evidence-based best practices.
Oh, yeah. That was a fun fact.
And my question was always like, how do you solve a problem that no one's ever solved before? Using only evidence-based best practices, which are by definition things we've already tried over and over and over and over and over again. Mm-hmm. Right? But that was our fat. That was our, everything had to fit in the kind of evidence-based best practices bucket. I think I've seen areas where it felt like philanthropy was giving for, I criticize politics that are about, there's politics and there's policy. Uh-huh. There's a real subtle but important difference, right? Public safety politics are the problem in America, right? Public safety politics are about how people perceive the public safety work that we're doing. Public safety policy is about fewer kids getting shot, right? Public safety politics would make me try to make you feel comfortable despite the fact that kids are still getting shot. Public safety policy makes me go all in to try to get fewer kids shot and then try to help you understand what we're doing kind of as a you follow me? As a backup to that. Right. And so I say all this to say, I think we've had philanthropy historically that has operated in the politics world, right? Who are the folks in the black community?
That we can't lobby.
What is that? That we can't lobby. That there's no accountability on, right? Who are the folks who are the most visible? Who are the folks who are most likely to get quoted in the paper? Who are the organizations that we don't want to be on the bad side of? And one of the things that I internalized really quickly, one of my mentors was like, listen, like if like that's just a different form of like poverty pimping. Right? Yeah. And so it's one of the reasons, and our Office of Financial Empowerment is a real pioneer in terms of evidence and independent evaluation. And the whole body of work that Director Calisto leads, she can tell you. I tell folks all the time, like when it comes to like the sacred work that we do, if an article doesn't include the word standard deviation, I don't need it. Like, don't send it to me, right? But she can tell you what the independent third-party professional evaluators say, like this is what the result that we're achieving because of this work that we're doing. Because it's crazy how little we talk about outcomes in politics. We're always talking about the process. We're always talking about what we're going to try. We're always talking about our new proposals and ideas. It's crazy how many billions of dollars we spend without ever So all I have to say is I think philanthropy is helping these days to fund, to help us do the type of experimental work, which you can't do experimental work without the like space to fail, and to fail forward. That's right. Politicians always have to prove that they're like King Midas. Everything I touched turned to gold. Look at them, perfect again. That's amazing, right? But that's not the real world. You can't. Like
you're risking nothing if you don't fail.
Every now and then. That's right. If you're batting 1,000, you're not swinging enough. That's right. And so, I think a lot of our foundation partners have done a much better job helping us to be able to do that, to stick in with us, for results and not just the sort of politics, and I think to put us in the driver's seat. Right, we've had different grants that we've done with different foundations, and sometimes you go down a road and you find out the road is different than you thought it was.
With the grant maker.
With the grant maker, right? Like. And we might have, one example is in our I keep talking about public safety, but in our public safety work, we started this notion of alternative responses to 911 call. And as we got halfway in, we realized we were really talking about optimal responses to 911 calls, right? Which doesn't always mean alternative, like the police doesn't come. Sometimes it means we're coming together. Sometimes it means we're doing a tag off. Sometimes it means, you know what I mean? And we ended up having a conversation with the funder. It was like, well, that's not what your proposal said to us at the beginning. And we talked through it. We walked through it, and they said, okay, got it. That makes sense.
Right.
Like keep doing that. So I think that type of leeway is important.
So you just described a powerful relationship between yourself as a city leader and philanthropy and the funders who have trusted you and you trust to have a real dynamic conversation. I wasn't here this morning, but I was here last night, and I was asking a lot of questions around sustaining the work, how it gets sustained, the challenges around the work, access to capital, right? And I know, Mark, where are you? Right. I know there's some voices who might say, well, we don't need that kind of capital, but financial institutions have a responsibility to cities, et cetera. So they hold your notes, okay? I'm curious what you would say to this room of folks who are trying different things to build employee ownership in business, figuring out different ways of thinking about shared capital and around real estate and how to claim land and build that land for the use of people, for the love of people. And doing it together. And the together part we'll come to. That's a hard thing to do. It's a hard thing to sustain, and people are people. But I'm curious about the relationship with financial institutions. And specifically, since I sit on a board, well, I don't sit on the board anymore. I guess I am on the board. But I have a board.
Decide.
We'll
go with it either way.
I have a board. I'm going through double consciousness right now. Okay. We have a board of financial institutions and foundations. And, they kind of tasked me to go out in the world and learn how they can be even better at what they do. What would you tell financial institutions who are looking at a community like this and wondering what's their entry point, what's their responsibility to this group of folks who are innovating, right? We say we want innovation. They're innovating, they're testing, they're trying, they put sweat equity, brain equity, intellectual capital, they're doing it all. What's the role of financial institutions to either grow this, sustain this, or to create new ways of growing it?
It's an intriguing question. Our financial institutions have historically been the gatekeepers of all of this. They're the gatekeepers of wealth, right? They get to decide who gets in and who gets out.
Who's risky, who's not.
Who's risky, who's not, right? I mean, the crazy thing, when we talk about tenants being able to pool their money and buy the building they live in, people go, oh, wow, that's incredible. And I say, it's not. It's really not incredible. Like, their rent pays every single bill for this building already. That's right. Right? This is not incredible. Like, this is not an incredible idea.
It's math, actually.
These 10 families already pay every single penny. Right. Like, there's not somebody out there like just, let's chip in for these families. And, like, these families already pay every cent that needs to be paid to facilitate this building. Right. And a financial institution gets to decide whether the person who doesn't live there, who might live across town or somewhere else, or those people who are like actually the lifeblood of that building, who are actually paying for it. I mean, same is true when we talk about worker-owned cooperatives, right? Like, the frontline workers are who are doing. I tell folks all the time, like, my job is to heroically sign papers and give speeches, while other people do all of the real work, right? Like, the frontline work, they're the ones who are making the money go, right? And then you learn the phrase, like, leverage buyout, right? I'm buying this company. I'm financing it off the future returns
of what they're going to do,
of the work that the frontline black and brown workers are doing in the first place. I'm not financing off of the money I have in my bank account already, but somebody decides who gets to come through those gates and who doesn't, right? And we get so stuck. Listen, the most important question anybody ever asked me, this is a weird story, but stick with me, I promise. When I first got elected mayor, somebody said, hey, are you going to move the furniture in the mayor's office? And, like, the question, like, blew my mind. When I tell you, I was like, whoa, right? Because I've been around City Hall for so long, and, people come and people go, but the desk is still in the same spot. And it was, like, printed on my brain, and I kid you not, I got elected mayor not knowing that it was within my power to move the desk from one side of the room to the other. And that's a silly anecdote, but, like, think about the ways in which we become married to, we become the enforcers of the status, like accidental enforcers of the status quo, that just because it's what we inherited. You know what I'm talking about? Like, we become the ones who, you know what I'm saying? And so, like, that's been something to me. But then something that's been on my mind a lot lately is I ask people to help me define different words, right? We need a functional definition of the word equity. It's got to be about money. When my business school dean said equity, she was talking about money. She was talking about appreciating assets. She was talking about being able to transferable assets that I can pass on to my child if I want to. She was talking about decision-making power, which is why we do all this stuff we do through, look at Twitter. It's full of people laughing at the task forces and the commissions that we build for this or that or the other. And she was talking about a shared economy. Because if I own equity in a company and the company has a good quarter, I have a good quarter too.
That's right.
We need a definition of the word precedent, because particularly as public leaders, banks, financial institutions, our courts, we operate on precedent in so many aspects of our country. Somebody give me a quick definition of the word precedent.
Happened before.
The way things are usually done, right? Yeah. The way things are always done. Somebody give me a quick definition of the word insanity. See what I'm talking about? Doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result, right? But that's what precedent is. So people look at that, why are you doing that different? Because we need a definition of poverty. We didn't know what poverty. So St. Paul, I'm one of the national co-chairs of this organization called Mayors for a Guaranteed Income. We're the first American city to use public funding to launch a guaranteed income pilot. It was an accident. I didn't know that until 2 years later. They're like, you're the first. I was like, we were? We were just trying to do the work. Again, I don't know where you grew up, but there was some uncle, there was somebody who told, if you give poor people money, they'll just...
Oh, hell yeah.
They'll just what?
They're going to waste it.
Yeah, they'll go spend on drugs and alcohol. Since the onset of the pandemic, 60-plus pilots across the country, we've distributed over $250 million in unconditional cash to low-income families across this country. Does not matter the city. 90% of the money goes to basic necessities.
Absolutely.
Less than 1% of the money goes to vices. I would argue that PPP was higher than 1%. And check this out. Families, it's not a surprise that families who have some money, so $500 a month for a period of 2 years, right? We just finished this pilot we were doing. It's not surprising that families have a little bit more money at the end of the month, are a little bit happier, have a little less stress. They can absorb a financial emergency a little bit better. What surprises some people is, again, I've got a handful of double-blind, randomized controlled studies that will show you that when low-income people have money, they don't use it as an excuse to work less. They use it as an opportunity to work more.
That's correct.
And what occurs to me is we've built a war on poverty. And I always joke, I'm like, we're 60 years in a war on poverty, and we just started giving poor people money. We just can't I have an idea.
Right.
But here's why. We've built the whole war on poverty on stupid lies. Somewhere along the way, me and you, and we had to unlearn it.
Yes, we did.
And if you were in this room, you probably unlearned this. But somewhere along the way, we believed somebody when they told us that hardworking people who never see a penny in their life without punching a pay clock are lazy. And people who live off of dividends, they're the industrious ones.
That's right. That's right.
Don't you believed it too. Don't act like I'm the only one in the room. We let somebody say, you see that single mom over there? She's working minimum wage, paying the rent and feeding 4 children.
Putting them through school.
She don't know how to manage her money. What? They're not even good lies. Right? But what they really were telling us is that when people live in poverty, it's because they lack character. And we bought it, and we built generations of public policy on the basis of that belief, which is why it's all failing. What we learned is when people live in poverty, it means they don't have money, and it means they don't have tools to make that money work for them. They don't have the vehicles.
Right.
And it suddenly turns poverty to me from some God-inspired phenomenon to just a machine that we built in City Hall that we can rewire in City Hall too. I'm just ranting. I don't even know what the question you asked me.
But you ranted well, though.
What was the question you asked me? Did I even get close to it?
No. I'm actually going to go a little different here because in this room and in your city, you've had people of all different persuasions who've decided to come together. I'm not saying that that's always peaceful. I'm not saying that's not always.
It shouldn't be peaceful.
Hang on, stay with me. There
It should be physical.
that there aren't disagreements and different points of view, generational views, lots of different dynamics. But somehow they've decided to work together for mutual benefit. And at this time, the narrative, because as you were laying out the narrative about, the single mom, because the narrative is she failed, right? But many of us who have had those moms, my sister's a judge.
That's right.
I'm doing what I do.
That's right.
My mother still don't know what I do.
That's right.
But she knows
So
that
one out of two ain't
But
bad.
she knew she got me out the house, right? And I didn't come back.
That's right.
Right?
That's
And now I can take care of her.
That's right.
My point, though, is the narratives are that we can't do what these people are doing. The narratives are that we're at each other's throats. The narratives are that someone's going to lose if we abandon zero-sum economics and policy. So,
Oh, you set me up. Good. Yeah, that's right. So that's what you
narrative.
So
What's the narrative?
speaking of what we should say to financial institutions to get them engaged in this,
And
right?
beyond, and beyond. What is the narrative? Because you've got some evidence of something different.
No, you're right. I mean, and that is this. And Brother Rapah, we were at a dinner. What was that? 2016, 2017, and Brother Rapah was talking about shared ownership models. And it was like the clouds opened up to me. And I sat down like, I don't know, what are you talking about? And it was like the clouds opened up to me. Not only do I think this is a way, I think this is the way. As we think about the impact that the boomers have had on the question at some point is going to be, who are the next investors? Who are the next business owners? Who's the next generation of homeowners? Who's the next generation of developers? Who's the next generation?
And we're very clear at Living Cities. Ownership is a pathway to wealth building.
Without a doubt.
You got to own.
Without a doubt.
Part of owning. Continue.
Without a doubt. Hands down, ownership is still the number one route to wealth creation in America.
Correct.
Right? And so at some level, and we spend a lot of time talking to banks about this, our Office of Financial Empowerment, our goal is to get you more customers. We got whole neighborhoods full of people who don't know that their money would be better off in your accounts.
That's true.
Racism is crazy. I think about Colin Kaepernick. You know Colin Kaepernick? You got people who are I'm invested billions of dollars in this football team. And I'd rather a less talented quarterback throw the ball than put it in the hands of Colin Kaepernick. Right? Racism is so self-defeating. I feel bad for racists, I don't want to say that, but...
But I saw it, though.
Right.
I saw the ball.
It's so self-defeating. It blocks you from seeing... Like I said, there was a point in time where we're too racist to let black people on our basketball teams. You know what I'm saying? And I think that there's a version of what we see from historically from financial institutions that are that exact same phenomenon, that are just as ridiculous as being nope, LeBron James is black, he can't come play with us. Because there's so much innovation out there. And again, that's what our goal is in St. Paul. That's why I say I think every place is fertile place for this type of work.
But I want to scale up this tension.
Let me finish. Because there's underinvested, underrealized potential that exists in so many neighborhoods across St. Paul, that exists in so many places across the country. And therein lies our, I think, most potent opportunities for economic growth that this country has to offer.
I hear the hope, but I want to go to the challenge.
Okay.
The challenge is I'm prepared to see that community lay fallow, nothing growing, minimal growth, rather than shift my point of view on who I invest in. 1.56%, 1.6, let me round it up, percent of private capital, 1.6% of $68 trillion in private capital are in the hands of all black people, all people of color, all women, being managed by that percentage. Right. Country that by 2045 is going to look like this room, and only a handful of white men figuring out what are the innovations that should be invested in. So we ain't going to grow. And we're comfortable with that. We're comfortable with that status quo. Now, what St. Paul is doing is challenging that status quo in a very public, hands on the ground, as the young people say, 10 toes down, doing it.
10 toes down.
You got it. So my question is, how does that get lifted? What is the evidence that we need to actually not just propound what's successful, but frankly, the shift in value? So you started with the shift in value. You started with the story of paving paradise and putting in a parking lot.
That's right.
Okay?
That's right.
I heard the song as you were saying.
That's right. That's what it is.
That's exactly what it is. And now you're doing different.
Let me say it this way. You know a picture, you know that picture, the equity picture?
Yeah.
Of the kids watching the baseball game?
Uh-huh.
I hate that picture. I'm serious. I absolutely hate that picture. I think that picture takes us the wrong way.
Uh-huh.
And you guys know the picture I'm talking about? It's a picture of kids watching the baseball game, and there's a fence, and they have to see over the fence. And some kids have the different blocks, and one kid is the taller kid, so he needs fewer blocks, and one kid's a medium, and one kid's a short kid, so he needs all the blocks. You know what I mean? And I think we've made the mistake of telling people with power, influence, and access to capital that the answer for our communities is your kid having fewer blocks. And listen, I try to be as altruistic as possible and lead with the sense of Philharmonic love. Mm-hmm. If the answer for the world is Melena and Naomi and Amila and Ari, we have a lot of kids. If the answer for the world is my kids having less, I'm out. That's not racist. I think that's logic, common sense, right? And that's why I hate that picture, because it creates a zero-sum notion of what we're trying to do.
Meaning if you have today, you need to lose in order to...
You have to lose in order for somebody... I don't think that's the truth. I think if St. Paul figures out that these folks who come into this city from another country are opening up new frontiers of economics that aren't accessible to just the Vikings, right? The people who come into St. Paul who speak different languages open up channels of business that we can't have access to otherwise, right? That's not taking blocks from somewhere. That's manufacturing new blocks, right? And that's the approach that we need to take. I'll give you an example. And so I think it's about not trying to get people to do a charity. And one of the things I've learned about my work is if we can get our city to the place where we do something because it's the right thing to do, it might last as long as I am in the room, right? We got to figure out how these are solid investments that generate a return. So my first year as on the city council, when I was working on the St. Paul Promise neighborhood, there's a group of folks, and I'd say probably most young black and brown elected officials have this dynamic, right? Where the side of town you go to get your sense of purpose may not necessarily be the side of town you go to get your votes and campaign contributions. And there was a group of folks who brought me into a room and said, hey, listen, we see you spending a lot of time in Frogtown, and some of you, if you know St. Paul, we see you spending all your time over there, and that work is cool, but what do we get out of this? And again, that's not racist.
Oh, no.
Right?
And you're their mayor.
I was their city councilman at the time, right? That's not racist. And I ended up saying, well, tell me this, what's your biggest challenge? What's your biggest frustration? Their biggest frustration was their property taxes kept going up. And they're like, well, you know what? My property value stayed still, but my property tax went up. I said, oh, well, that's because property values somewhere else are going down. So if that's your biggest problem, then what we need is a strategy that'll help stabilize property values somewhere else. By the way, this is an education initiative, and the number one thing that impacts property values is, well, number 1 and 2 is always public safety and school quality.
Exactly.
And they went, oh, get back over there. So I think that's the way we have to approach it. I don't think we can expect financial institutions to do it because it's in the best interest of, my children, or because, we're, whatever. I don't think we should expect them to go beyond kind of the basic kind of CRA type of kind of requirements. I think as we deliver a vision for the shareholder returns that they can have that they can plug into that they don't otherwise. The championships you can win once you figure out to let LeBron James on your team. You know what I mean? Once we figure out the financial, that value proposition there, that's where I think it's on us to be able to demonstrate that financial proposition, which is where we need those laboratories of democracy.
I'm going to throw an audible here. The organizing team did not give me authorization to do this, but I do want to open up for questions because I see lots of questions and I see faces who are like locked in. So I want to make sure we do that because one of our missions is to share the wealth and to share the ideas around the work and to give credit to where the creativity is happening, right? We're a national intermediary. We learn from so many people everywhere, and we're trying to figure out how do we distill and share that so that others can pick up. Like, I want you to get a call from Birmingham and Jackson, saying, how are you doing this? And how can I do this in a context where I am? So, ready for questions?
Hi, everyone. My name is Tammy, and I'm with Urban Homeworks. I loved what you were talking about, Mayor Carter, and I guess I'm curious to know, like earlier when you talked about needing to make a bigger room of decision makers, like how you as mayor and how city council is being intentional to, one, remove barriers and make space for community members, that single mom, the hard workers that we're talking about that work 9 to 5, they can't speak or they can't come to a city council meeting and testify at 2 p.m. when they're at work. They can't come to this roundtable because they're at work. How are you making space to be intentional to bring those decision makers to the table?
I love that question, and I really appreciate it. So one is everything we do through public engagement, right? So every member of my cabinet, every single member of my cabinet I've ever appointed has been appointed through what we call a community-based hiring process, right? Where we have literally hundreds of people who get together and help kind of think through people who might make a good library director. They recruit candidates. They sort through the resumes. They decide who they want to interview. They do the first round of interviews and send me a couple of finalists who they think would be good people, right? The first time we did it, like the newspaper was like, wow, this is the most diverse cabinet we've ever seen in the history of the city. How did you do that, right? And what I end up telling the press is in a diverse city like St. Paul, you don't have to how did you get a diverse cabinet? You have to, how did you get a white cabinet? You know what I mean? It's true. You have to just basic probability and statistics, right? You have to do something special to get an all-white cabinet, not to get the type of diverse cabinet that we landed on. So whether it's minimum wage or whatever it is, like I said, we're always kind of launching task forces. We have a set of task forces and commissions that help us kind of bring the recommendations to the city council and to the mayor to make decisions on. We launched a policy to put at least 2 young people on every single one of those task forces and commissions, and we pay them to be on there. And it's 2 because I was that kid when I was a kid. It'd be put Melvin on the board, right? And I'd be sitting at this board table a lawyer, what do you think? Mayor, what do you think? Doctor, what do you think? Right? So-and-so, representative, what do you think? Melvin, what do high school students think? And I'd be yeah. Right? And so we were trying to build a critical mass to make sure we're not just kicking them all so we say we did it, right? And so we do a lot of public engagement with the city. Every budget that I bring to the city council, we do what we call our city budget engagement games, right? Which we go to community. So I'm sitting in Johnson High School, right? I'm sitting in Central High School in the lunchroom or in the cafeteria, in a math class, just talking to people this is how the city budget works. Tell me how you think this through, or senior homes or boards of directors or neighborhood groups. Some of them are 10 a.m. on a Monday. Some of them are 6 p.m. on a Thursday. Some are on a Saturday. So trying to vary stuff around so that we're able to accommodate. And some of them are virtual, so we can accommodate the way different people's lives work. But none of that actually gets to the heart of the question that you just asked. The best example of good governance I've ever seen is that, you guys know Central High School? There's a spot on the side of the grass at Central High School, my high school, class of 97. Woo woo. There's a spot on the side of the grass where for 30 years, there's been a shortcut, a little trail worn in the grass. And, it always strikes me that if we were to, put an announcement, there's 2,000 students at Central, listen at 5:30 next Wednesday, there will be a public hearing at City Hall on optimal sidewalk alignment. The optimal sidewalk alignment public hearing is 5:30 next Wednesday at City Hall, right? You know how those students would respond, right? But every morning, for 20 years, 2,000 students know and show that it makes more sense to walk across the grass right here than to go up around kind of these, geometric shapes that we create, right? And what I was going to say is a good example of good government is eventually the school district paved a sidewalk right where that shortcut was. And so we got to know that people are literally always telling us what they think. People are always talking with their feet. Like every moment of every day, our residents are trying to tell us something, right? On their way to work, on their way to school, like on their way with their shopping. Like everything our residents do is trying to tell us something. And so that's the challenge that we always give our team is like, I need you to tap into not just what people, at some point, what people said at 5:30 on a Wednesday is less important. Because let me tell you that amazing, beautiful plans I've seen die because 7 people said something into the microphone at 5:30 on a Wednesday and pretended they spoke for a community, right? Look, I'm telling secrets right now. I don't like when people say the community this. And I'm like, the community? Like, at what meeting did the community decide this? Or are you just saying you talked to like 4 people at a coffee shop yesterday, right? And this is something I get really passionate about because we have a neighborhood in St. Paul right now, Hamlin Midway, has an old library. The library is 100 years old. It's inaccessible. The bathrooms are downstairs. The building is, terrible from the perspective of there's a group of maybe 15 to 20 people who want to convince us that this neighborhood does not want, like the community, right, does not want a brand new state-of-the-art multi-million-dollar public library. And if that's true, it's probably the first in the history of the planet neighborhood that does not want a brand new state-of-the-art multi-million-dollar public library for their kids to play at, right? But 12 people have a megaphone and they can be super loud. And so all I have to say is my task for my team is always like find the places where people are voting with our feet. And that's what's led us to like some of the things I'm most proud of is things like fine-free libraries. We don't do late fines in our public libraries anymore. We don't charge people for swim lessons. Councilmember, we haven't even got this report to you guys. This is the first year of that policy. 70% of the kids who came to swim lessons, our free swim lessons this year, did not know how to swim and never had a swim lesson before in their life. 80% of the kids who came to swim lessons this year, their parents don't know how to swim, right? And so, like, identifying those lanes, eliminating participation fees for school, for youth sports, things like that. To me, the coolest things that our administration is doing is not because somebody said something in the microphone at a public hearing, but it's because we heard something that people weren't saying in the microphone.
When you think about sustainability of this work and the ingenuity that's happening here and the potential for St. Paul to educate, inform and inspire other cities, other leaders, the financial sector, and maybe some folks in philanthropy who, frankly, can take a bigger risk. What would you tell them? What would you tell them? I mean, you've been telling us for a long time, but now that I'm 3 years in, I think I know a little bit more about how do you leverage the organization that I'm in. And I really want to walk away with a charge for Living Cities, a charge for this field. And it's grounded in what I know is happening in this room and grounded in what you just shared this afternoon, both on the policy side, the practice side, the human side, and the value side. So I'm curious what you would tell us that we need to do better going forward. What's our challenge and call to action?
That's a good question. I'm really proud of, if you can't tell, I'm really proud and fired up about the things that we're doing in St. Paul, about some of the policies and some of the initiatives that we've put in place, largely, many of the things in particular we're doing through our Office of Financial Empowerment. I tell people every day that even more than I'm proud of the what, I'm proud of the how. The secret sauce is really the how. Because when we do stuff, sometimes people are like, "How? What are you going to do to make sure some future mayor and city council can't undo this?" And the answer is nothing. Like, I can't do anything to make sure, like, to keep a future. Like, if the next mayor will have all the same powers that I had. Like, what are you talking about? The only way to make this stuff sustainable over time is to ensure that there's a community demand for it. Literally, the only way. And so this, like, concept of like really engaging, and I spend a lot of time telling people this, like whether it's a bank, your foundation, your organization, your business, your government, whatever it is, when you say we need to do better by whoever those people are, right? We think we can be more impactful among young people. We think we can be more impactful among people of color and indigenous Americans. Whoever the whoever the people who've experienced homelessness, whoever the population is, that you decide, that you want to serve. My guess is if you're in this room, it's because you're like desperate. Like you're the ones who are up at 11 o'clock. Your spouse is going to sleep, and you're sitting there looking on your phone, trying to figure out like what are new ways, or thinking through kind of what are new. Am I right?
I don't know anything about that.
Right. That's right. And my task for you is stop. Like free yourself from that. Right. My task for you is like what I'd love to see us all do is stop trying to figure out new ways to help those people. You see where I'm going?
Those people.
You understand what I'm saying? Like, I know it's hard. Like we want to help those people. Stop trying to figure out how we can help them. Because we can't help them if we're stuck with a wall between we and them. A cognitive wall there. And so my question is, like, whoever they are they on our board? Whoever they are they involved in our decision-making processes? Whoever they are, until they are included in who we mean when we say we're going to be like super limited. I think that's my biggest, and that to me is my biggest challenge in terms of like how we sustain the work that we're doing, how we change the risk calculus. I was talking about the risk calculus. When people say like public safety, you've done alternatives and optimal responses, and this public safety policy versus politics I was talking about. And I got mad one day because someone was like, you're changing things, and that's risky. And it's like, look, I'm honest to God, my nephew got robbed at gunpoint a couple years ago in St. Paul, like on the block I grew up in. And when they say like that's risky to change our approaches to public safety, what you're saying is that me getting as many votes next year as I did 3 years ago should be more important to me than making sure my nephew never gets robbed. Like my sister spent a year driving around the block so my nephew could have the courage to walk his dog on his own block. It kills me to even say that out loud. It's not worth it to have this job if we're not going to do everything that we can to make sure none of those young people kind of experience that. And so here's the final thing I want to say to you, and I promise you I'll get out of your way because I know you have a lot to do, is this. All the stuff that I'm proud of, stuff that we've done as a city, all the stuff I'm proud of, stuff that I've done in my career, are things that at one point in time I thought felt impossible. And that was the most dangerous moment for them. Like that was the most perilous moment for college savings accounts, for guaranteed income, for the St. Paul prom. All the stuff I'm bragging on, like the most shaky ground that's ever stood on, was not a public hearing, was not a city council vote, was not some conservative tweet monster. You know what I mean? It was like me in my mind ready to destroy this and send it to the trash can of impossibility. So my second biggest challenge to you is to make them a part of us. My biggest challenge for you is, my guess is everybody in this room has something in that back drawer, something in your back pocket, your bottom drawer, on your desk somewhere that you know would be amazing, but you also know would be impossible. I'm going to give you a second to just gather which one that is. We've already tried running the world without that idea. Give us a chance to try running the world with it.
Thanks for joining us today on Live with Living Cities. We're always thrilled to have you as part of these essential conversations about building a just and equitable society. Your time, curiosity, and commitment to change mean a lot, and we can't wait to have you back for our next episode. If you'd like to get involved in our work, visit our website at livingcities.org to learn more about the programs in the cities we're working with. Subscribe to this podcast to hear more stories from the front lines of change, and please, share this episode with others who care about closing the racial wealth gap and building a more equitable future for all. We'd also love to hear from organizations interested in becoming members of Living Cities. If your organization would like to join our coalition of changemakers, reach out to us at lcinfo@livingcities.org. That's LCINFO@livingcities.org with the subject line, Member. And if you're interested in having your city become a strategic partner and member of the Closing the Gaps Network, reach out to us at lcinfo, that's LCINFO, @livingcities.org with the subject line, CTG Network. And before we wrap up, we want to extend a huge thank you to the incredible organizations that make this work possible. Living Cities is powered by a coalition of leaders and changemakers whose dedication and support drive our mission forward. We're honored to work alongside you in the movement to close the racial wealth gap and create lasting impact in communities across the country. Thanks again, everyone, for tuning in. Until next time, stay engaged, stay inspired, and let's keep working together toward a future where equity is a reality for all. I'm Justin Charles, and this has been Live with Living Cities.